Painit ng painit ang nalalapit na eleksyon. Pero hindi dapat kalimutan na tayo ay nasa gitna pa ng pandemya at may mga nagsusulputang variants ng COVID-19 na posibleng mas malala. Pakikipagkamay, beso-beso, selfies, may mahigpit na paalala si Commission on Election spokesman James Jimenez.
Well, napakahalaga kasi na panatiliin nating ang seguridad ng ating mga mamamayan. Alam naman natin na during the campaign period, talagang ang posibleng tamaan ng COVID, dahil dito nga sa ongoing na pandemic natin, ay hindi naman yung mga kandidato o yung kanilang mga campaign staff, kundi yung mga taong nag-a-attend sa kanilang mga rally. Kaya napakahalaga na pangalagaan natin ang kanilang kalusugan. And this responsibility falls squarely on the shoulders of the candidates and their campaign teams.
Narito ang mga panuntunang itinakda ng COMELEC sa ilalim ng Resolution number 10732 kung paano matitiyak na ang mga campaign activities para sa May 9, 2022 na eleksyon ay hindi maging COVID super spreader events. Lahat ng kandidato at kanilang mga campaign support staff ay itinuturing na authorized persons outside of residence or APOR kahit ano paman ang alert level system at kanilang vaccination status. Ang face-to-face sorties, rallies, conventions, motorcades, caravans at meeting de avance ay pinapayagan lamang sa mga lugar na nasa ilalim ng alert levels 1, 2 at 3. Ang mga batang may edad 17 pababa at mga nakatatandang may edad 66 pataas at ang may mga kondisyong medikal, kabilang na ang mga buntis, ay bawal dumalo sa mga ganitong aktibidad.
At huwag nating kakalimutan yung mga selfie, mga pagkamay-kamay, pagyakap-yakap, beso-beso. Saglit lang yan. Wala pang ilang segundo yan, tapos na yan, lumipas na. Pero pag kayo ay nagkasakit, dahil dyan, pag kayo ay nagka-COVID, mahabang gamutan yan, mahabang bubunuin ng inyong kalusugan yan, at hindi lang yan, pati ng inyong finances. Napakamahal magkasakit ngayon. So, huwag nating isasang-alang sa kakunting enjoyment yung mas mahabang problema ng COVID.
Ang indoor campaign ay hindi pinapayagan sa mga lugar na nasa ilalim ng Alert Level 4. Mga outdoor na aktibidad lamang na nasa 30% capacity ang pinapayagan. Kahit na anong meeting, convention, rally, motorcade, caravan o meeting de avance ay hindi pinapayagan sa mga lugar na nasa ilalim ng Alert Level 5. Ang mga kandidato o ang kanilang mga campaign support staff ay pinagbabawalang gawin ang mga sumusunod. Huwag pumasok sa pribadong pamamahay habang nagsasagawa ng house-to-house campaign kahit pa pumayag ang may-ari ng bahay. Bawal ang pakipagkamay, pagyakap, beso-beso o kahit na anong physical contact sa kandidato o mga kasama nila at sa publiko. Bawal ang makipag-selfie o pagkuha ng litrato na lalabag sa social distancing protocols. Bawal mamahagi ng pagkain o inumin upang maiwasang magtanggal ng face mask ang mga tao.
Ang ating kalusugan at kasiguruhan sa panahon ng pandemya ay nakasalalay sa individual na pananagutan or individual responsibility. Kailangan tayo maging responsible tayo sa sarili nating mga gawa. Kung tayo ay magbibehave in a safe manner, magiging safe tayo lahat. Kung tayo mismo ang lalabag sa mga protocols na itinakda ng ating health authorities, talagang tataas ang tsansa ng infection in our population. So, kailangan doon sa mga botante, doon sa mga nanonood ng mga rally, kayo mismo, magkusa kayo na huwag ninyong gagawin yan.
Tandaan, ang paglabag sa mga health protocols sa mga aktibidad na may kinalaman sa eleksyon ay itinuturing na election offense. Ang mga lalabag sa panuntunang itinakda ay nahaharap sa hanggang 6 na taong pagkabilanggo at multa na hindi bababa sa 10,000 piso. Maaari ding mawala ang karapatang bumoto pag ikaw ay nahatulang guilty sa paglabag sa mga protocols. Tunay na mahirap ang pangangampanya para sa eleksyon, pero sa gitna ng patuloy na public health crisis, ito ay higit pang naging masalimuot. Ang mga kandidato, ang kanilang campaign staff, at ang publiko ay marapat na piliin lagi ang kaligtasan at kalusugan una sa lahat. Tandaan, huwag matakot bumoto at bumoto ng tama. Kung ikaw ay nakakita ng aktibidad na lumalabag sa mga naturang panuntunan sa iyong lugar, huwag mag-atubiling magsumbong sa COMELEC sa kanilang Facebook, Twitter at mobile. Kada eleksyon, pumipili ang sambayanang Pilipino ng susunod na lider ng bansa, ng taong magtatakda ng plano at polisiya para sa 6 na taon ng ating kinabukasan. Pero ano nga ba ang hinahanap natin sa isang lider? Sa anong mga kwalifikasyon natin titimbangin ang mga kandidatong nanliligaw para sa matamis nating boto?
Dapat ang leader natin matapang, walang uurungan.
Oo nga.
Ang gusto kong kandidato ay yung magaling sumayaw at entertaining.
Gusto ko yung matikas, yung magaling magdala ng sarili.
Sana yung susunod na presidente mayaman na para hindi na mangurakot.
Alam mo bang base sa ating konstitusyon, 5 lang ang kwalifikasyon para sa mga nagnanais tumakbong presidente ng Pilipinas? Una, kailangan natural-born citizen ng Pilipinas. Ikalawa, kailangang rehistradong botante. Ikatlo, marunong bumasa at magsulat. Ikaapat, nasa edad na 40 sa araw ng eleksyon. At ikalima, residente ng Pilipinas sa loob ng 10 taon bago ang eleksyon. Simple, hindi ba? Walang itinatakdang kwalifikasyon base sa edukasyon, work experience o kayamanan. Pero simple nga bang tunay ang mga dapat nating hanapin sa susunod na leader ng ating bansa? Ayon kay Commission on Elections spokesperson James Jimenez, marami pa tayong pwede at dapat hanapin.
Very basic o payak ang ating requirements. Ibig ba sabihin nito na yan lang ang kailangan nating hanapin? Siyempre hindi. Yan ang tinatawag nating minimum. Pwede kang maghanap ng mas lampas pa dyan. No? Halimbawa, maghanap ka ng taong merong integridad. Gawin mong necessary ingredient yan. Gawin mong kalakip yan ng pagpili mo kung sino magiging pangulo. Kailangan may integridad, kailangan may kakayanan, kailangan magaling, kailangan matalino, at kailangan nagsasabi ng katotohanan sa bayan. Kasi ang pipiliin natin ay hindi lang basta-bastang tao. Leader natin ang pipiliin natin. Leader natin na bibigyan natin ng napakalaking kapangyarihan. Kapangyarihan over our lives, over our livelihoods, over our country. So, bagaman maliit or payak lamang ang requirements ng konstitusyon, kailangan tayo bilang botante, pag boboto na tayo, kailangan medyo mas mataas naman ang standards natin.
Tunay na marami tayong dapat hanapin na katangian sa susunod na leader ng bayan. Ngayon, higit kailanman, kailangan nating maging mapanuri.
Sa tingin ko bilang botante, kailangan maging mas mapanuri tayo dahil hindi biro ang halalan. Hindi biro ang hinihingi sa atin ng mga kandidatong yan. Gusto nila maging leader natin. Gusto nila magkaroon ng kapangyarihan sa ating kabuhayan, sa ating buhay, sa ating bansa. At dahil dyan, kailangan natin maging mapanuri. Kung jowa mo nga lang pinadadaan mo sa butas ng karayom bago mo sagutin, paano pa kaya yung mga elected leaders natin na may tunay na kapangyarihan sa iyo?
Sabi nga ni Director Jimenez, kung kinikilatis nating maigi ang isang potensyal na jowa bago ibigay ang matamis nating oo, mas lalong higit na dapat nating kilatisin ang mga nanliligaw para sa makapangyarihan nating boto.
Hindi pa kami pwedeng bumoto.
Kaya sana pumili kayo ng tama para sa aming kinabukasan.
Tandaan, huwag matakot bumoto at bumoto ng tama. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. At this point, we'll ask you to turn on your video so we can take a look at your faces from wherever you are. Hello. Good afternoon to our colleagues from Myanmar, Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand. Good to see all of you in our first international forum this year, organized by the Philippine Press Institute, supported by the Hans Seidel Foundation. If you want to know more about the Philippine Press Institute, we're just a click away. It's www.philpressinstitute.net. I am certain that some of you are familiar with the Philippine Press Institute because you also have your own press organizations in your respective countries. And I think many years back, we've already had some kind of an exchange physically, though, and hoping to see all of you when things get back to normal. And we're not pretty sure when it's going to be, but hopefully, Ami, by next year, Joyce, next year, we don't know.
Yeah.
But we're praying that all things will be all right for all of us. But it's good to see all of you, albeit in small boxes right now. My name is Ariel Cisabilino. I'm the Executive Director and Trustee of the Philippine Press Institute. Joining also with me today is our Seminar Director, Joyce Pañares, and the other members of the board. I'd like to acknowledge our Vice President, and all the way from Mindanao, she's also editor-in-chief of an award-winning newspaper, one of the biggest newspapers in the country, based outside Metro Manila, Amalia Cabusao, who will be speaking on behalf of the chairman of the Institute. Hello. And I think a lot more would want to enter the meeting room in our Zoom meeting room. And just to remind everybody, we're live on Facebook streaming. Thanks to all of you, those who are watching us right now from all over the world. Thanks for joining us. It's going to be a significant and engaging forum for all of us. We've conducted a lot of training programs this pandemic, and thanks to Hans Seidel Foundation for supporting this first attempt on an international forum this year. Hopefully we get to have another one this year and in the coming years. If you want to know more, as I said, details of our activities, Ami, right? Please visit us on our Facebook page and also the page of Hans Seidel Foundation for more information on our activities. Our activities are not just limited to the Filipino audience. We have some activities for you guys outside the Philippines, so please join us wherever you can, all right? At this point, to officially open our international forum, please welcome on behalf of the PPI Board of Trustees and the entire membership of the Philippine Press Institute. As I said, she is the Vice President of the Philippine Press Institute, also Editor-in-Chief of Mindanao Times. Please welcome Amalia Cabusao. Hi, Ami. Good afternoon to you. Hello.
Hi. Hello. Yeah.
Isn't it we just met yesterday? As if we haven't met
Last
yesterday, right?
Yeah, last night.
Last night.
Yeah, so I will be reading the message of our president, our chair, Professor Mr. Rolando Estabilio. So good afternoon and welcome to yet another virtual gathering organized by the Philippine Press Institute and with the support of the Hans Seidel Foundation. Thank you also to our friends, speakers, and reactors from the Asia-Pacific region who made time in their busy schedules to join us today and share their experiences and perspectives, as well as exchange ideas with journalism practitioners, educators, and students. Today, our conversation will revolve around journalism for the public good. And let's face it, many of us did not go into this profession because we wanted to earn a lot of money, or wanted to be famous and influential, or even because we were told we could write or speak well. Sure, some of us may have only stumbled into this field, but I think it is safe to assume that we are now here because we were, at some point in our lives, motivated to do something good and contribute something to improve the lives of our fellow citizens, and we want to do something bigger than ourselves. Standing by this choice is not easy. Many things could have happened. Each of us in this forum, from our own countries and communities, has an experience or two that tested our commitment to journalism and made us question whether this is truly where we are meant to be. Over time, we may have been disappointed in ourselves, felt we have fallen short of our expectations, felt overwhelmed by the forces that seek to frustrate our goals, or become subject to intimidation, influence, or even fear. Despite the challenges, every morning we make a conscious decision to keep doing what we do. In our country, the Philippines, this information has become the bane of society. As people indiscriminately accept and maliciously peddle fake news to serve their own ends, there are also attacks on the credibility of the press. Suddenly, the rigorous methods we employ in gathering information is put into question. Why go through all this trouble when YouTube or Facebook or TikTok videos tell us otherwise? Suddenly, some of us in the media are derided for being biased or for being a paid hack. Indeed, disinformation makes us less free because it makes people less able to make enlightened decisions about our lives and our political future. This ability to meaningfully participate in discourse and to decide on issues that concern our nation is the public good that we seek to protect and uphold. We need to fight disinformation with all our might by good, unrelenting, principled, and diligent journalism. We do not always succeed, mind you. Sometimes we acknowledge that in some instances we could have done better. But it's a daily commitment and we keep at it. Our presence here is a testament to this. This is from where I stand today. I am sure that our panelists and reactors have their own stories to tell. Nawala ako. Okay. I'm sorry. um,
It's okay,
um,
Ami.
okay, yeah, my internet is going crazy. But these experiences are unique to their environment, contents, and even the personal circumstances. I am eager to listen to the to the discussions. Thank you once again for being here. I wish you a good afternoon, and I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge Attorney Getz Heniken of Hans Seidel Foundation, Mr. Ramon Tuazon, the Senior Media Development Specialist at UNESCO Myanmar, Mr. Daniel Bastardo of the Asia Pacific Desk Head of the Reporters Without Borders, um, to the to Mr. Piachi Chensuk Swadi from Thailand, former editor-in-chief of Bangkok Post and advisor to Frontier Myanmar, Ms. Monmon Miat, the independent journalist and contributor to Irrawaddy magazine, to Mr. Wayu Jatmika, CEO of Tempo Digital and founder of CheckFacta.com, the first fact-checking collaboration platform in Indonesia, and Mr. Thian Fiorin, working for the news site Filmi Me in Cambodia. Thank you once again for being here. I wish you all a good afternoon. Let us all take care in body, mind, and spirit. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Amalia Cabusa, Vice President of the Philippine Press Institute, also Editor-in-Chief of Mindanao Times. There, ladies and gentlemen, that's how the internet infrastructure in the Philippines is. But we're used to it, okay? But hopefully we have a smooth discussion sans the internet problem or Wi-Fi connection. Hopefully it doesn't happen until the end of the program. So thanks very much, Ami. And by the way, please do not forget to like the FB pages of Philippine Press Institute and Hans Seidel Foundation. At the end of the program, you'll get a link on the chat room for a survey, questionnaire, or evaluation form. So we'll get to know how you take a look at the whole proceeding. So we'll know how to do things better, probably in our next international forum, right? Right, Ami? All right, having mentioned about Hans Seidel Foundation, we cannot do all of this, including our local programs, enough with the generous support of Hans Seidel Foundation. Please welcome the resident representative of Hans Seidel Foundation to the Philippines, our very good friend, and well, in the Philippines, he's a good friend, and he is going to be a good friend of yours in the future outside the Philippines. Please welcome Attorney Guts Heineke. Good afternoon to you. How are you?
Thank you very much, Ariel. I'm wonderful, although it's Monday.
Good.
Let's start. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor, it's a dream to welcome you this afternoon for this, our first regional international conference about journalism and especially about press freedom. The Hans Seidel Foundation is a German NGO, and we are here in Southeast Asia for more than 40 years. We started in 1979 with our first office in the Philippines, in Manila. And currently we are running offices in Vietnam, in Thailand, in Myanmar, in Indonesia, and one in Laos. The goal of the Hans Seidel Foundation, well, first of all, we are in the service of peace and development, and it's our goal worldwide to build up democracy and good governance. And having said these words, I mean, that gives you already a little bit the background why we are supporting the Philippine Press Institute, why we are supporting civic journalism, because we are saying in order to inform the people what's going on, the political developments, you need journalism, you need journalists that will inform the people. And that's the reason why we have this wonderful collaboration with the PPI for a few years already. Thank you very much, Philippine Press Institute, for that. At the same time as well, thank you very much to all the keynote speakers, to all the reactors, to all the journalists, and of course to all the participants that we are seeing here, currently 145. That's really a good start. As a goal for Hans Seidel Foundation, Ariel has mentioned it, it's our first conference, but it should not be our last conference. So our vision is that we will have these kind of conferences in the future. And of course, I saw just in the chat box, somebody was saying, I'm getting tired of these boxes. Yes, same applies to me. Me too. I cannot see Zoom anymore. I want to see people in real life, face to face. And that's our goal for the future, that we will build up a series of real conferences here in Southeast Asia, where we see each other face to face, and we will meet each other face to face, and then we can discuss for 3 days, 4 days, current problems, current developments, current challenges. And yeah, that will be, in German we say, that will be the salt in the soup, because then it becomes essential. Therefore, Ariel has mentioned it. Please, at the end, you will see there's a very short and very easy survey. Please participate in that survey. Give us your feedback. That is as well a little bit the basis for us, that we can convince our head office in Munich, Germany, to fund more activities like this, and especially to fund the big conferences where we will see each other face to face. Having said that, thank you very much to all of you for joining. Have a wonderful afternoon, and let's have a fruitful discussion and conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Attorney Guts Heineke, resident representative of Hans Seidel Foundation to the Philippines. Also looking forward to our face-to-face, wherever that's going to be, probably next year. As I said, Francis, just Francis, our colleague, media colleague from the southern part of the Philippines. I feel you. Holy Francis, get to see each other, because Francis is also part of our training team. At this point, also like to acknowledge again our colleagues, Joyce, from Myanmar, Cambodia, Indonesia, Thailand, and all the rest of the participants from the Philippines and other Asian countries or in the world. Joyce, right? At this point, please welcome my good friend who is going to be co-hosting, co-moderating this international forum. She is Seminar Director of the Philippine Press Institute, also news editor of one of the biggest daily broadsheets in the Philippines. Please welcome Joyce Pañares. Good afternoon to you. Aren't you excited for this international forum, Joyce?
Hi, Ariel. Good afternoon. Yes, very, very excited to start.
And you look so pretty, very
Thank
pretty.
you.
I know you have a lot of friends now in small boxes, because you've really coordinated with them. And probably they're very happy to see you. All of us are very happy to see your colleagues in the region, because you've seen them probably like many years back.
Yeah, several years ago.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Yeah, and hopefully, as Attorney Guts said, we get to see them in another international forum. Not this year, though, but probably in the next 2 years. So, well, let's pray for that. So, what do you expect in this international forum, Joyce? The floor is yours. Let's take a look at what you have in store for us, an outline of what we're going to see or listen to in this episode, first episode of our international forum.
Okay, so just very quickly, because I don't want to take much time.
Yeah, sure.
We want to devote it as much as possible to the discussions. We invited a lot of friends and colleagues and allies in the region, in the Asian region, to join us today. The forum will be headlined, of course, by Mr. Ramon Tuason. He's the Senior Media Development Specialist of UNESCO Myanmar. He was also my grocery mate in Myanmar. When I was staying there, we would always bump into each other in the grocery, me buying matchang and him buying his stuff. And then we will have, of course, Mr. Daniel Bastard. I hope he's already in the Zoom room because I know there's a time difference. He's in Paris right now. He's the Asia Pacific desk head of the Reporters Without Borders. And we will hear from him a situation report on the press freedom in the region. And then we have 4 distinguished members for us panel of reactors. We have Mr. Pichay Chuen Suksawadi, a very good friend and mentor of mine. He's a former editor-in-chief of Bangkok Post, and now he's an advisor to Frontier Myanmar. We have Wayu Diatmika. He's now the CEO of Tempo Digital. Hi, Wayu. Last time we saw each other was like over a decade ago, physically, right? Or
physically, virtually, we
physically
chat all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's also the founder of SecFacta. It's the first fact-checking collaboration platform in Indonesia. He's involved with the Global Investigative Journalism Network. He's done so much, so much. I really take my hat off to this guy. And then we have, of course, Miss Mon Mon Nyat, the only rose among our panel of reactors. She is an independent journalist. She's a graduate of the Ateneo Center for Journalism as well, a classmate as well. And she contributes from time to time to Irrawaddy magazine. Hi, Mon Mon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Joyce.
I look so excited to see all the people. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Tin Pirin, is a journalist working for the Khmer news site, Timay Timay. Hi, Tien. Good afternoon.
Yeah. A round of applause to all of them, Joyce, and we get to listen to them later on. Just a quick reminder, we are not going to have a survey questionnaire, but all of you in the meeting room are going to receive your certificates of attendance. For those who are watching, please do enjoy our discussions today. All right, Joyce.
Okay, so without further ado, first I'd like to thank all of our participants. We have at least 160 now in the Zoom room.
Wow.
Over 200 actually registered for this. So we expect more to probably follow in a bit and enter the Zoom room in a bit. Our discussions are very important right now because journalism, press freedom, and human rights are all interlinked. And journalism, press freedom is a human right, regardless of whatever platform or whatever the context we are operating in. And of course, Asia is a very diverse region and different situations for our colleagues across the region. So without further ado, I'd like to call Mr. Mon Tuason. He's the immediate past president and trustee of the Asian Institute of Journalism. He's also the Secretary General of the Asian Media Information and Communication Center. To give us our keynote address, Mr. Tuason. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Magandang hapon sa ating lahat.
Good afternoon, Sir Mon.
Magandang hapon, Ariel. Kamusta? Kay Ami, kay
Hi,
Julie.
sir.
At saka, magandang hapon sa lahat kay Attorney Guts. By this time, I suppose you already know some Filipino words. Thank you for inviting me here. Let me request that I share my PowerPoint presentation.
Sure, sir. Yes.
Yan. Okay na ba?
Yes, clear.
Okay, let me start with the question. Out of control? Out of control. Which title best describes the state of press freedom today? Is it the first, which ends with an exclamation point? Or the second one, which ends with a question mark? This may be similar to the rhetorical question, often asked, do you see a half-empty glass of water or a half-full glass of water? To end with an exclamation point or question mark depends on how you want the sentence to end and what you are doing to defend press freedom, to defend the truth. My presentation is divided into three main parts. Journalism as a public good. Journalism is a public good. The world trends in freedom of expression, 2021, 2022, and the World Press Freedom Day, 2022. Let's go to the first topic. Journalism as a public good. We define public good as those which are essential to services or commodities available to everyone in society without exclusion. States are expected to ensure access to these services or commodities, especially in cases where individuals or sectors have limited financial resources to access these essential services or commodities. Good examples would be public education, public health, national defense, you have public libraries, you even have still public postal services, and so on and so forth. UNESCO recognizes news and information as public good that every individual should be entitled to. Journalism produces news and information in the public interest. In that regard, public good demands public trust. We should be reminded that only a free and independent media can ensure access to accurate, timely, and reliable news and information, which are the qualities of news as a public information or as a public good. In the context of COVID-19 pandemic, access to accurate, timely, and reliable news and information is a matter of life and death. Thus, public interest and public good. Let me go to my second topic. Flashback, the World Press Freedom Day, which we will celebrate again in the next few weeks, May 3. In 1991, in Windhoek, Namibia, there was a seminar organized by UNESCO entitled Seminar on Promoting an Independent and Pluralistic African Press. The highlight of this event was the adoption on May 3, 1991 of the Windhoek Declaration. This declaration calls on the development of free, pluralistic, and independent media as essential elements of democracy. 2 years later, the UN General Assembly proclaimed May 3 as World Press Freedom Day to commemorate the adoption of the Windhoek Declaration of 1991. Last year, the theme of the World Press Freedom Day was information as a common good. Again, this was held in Windhoek, Namibia. During this event, the conference adopted the Windhoek Plus 30 Declaration on Information as a Public Good. This declaration identified 3 conditions for journalism to be part of information as a public good. What are these? 1, media viability. 2, transparency of technology companies. And number 3, media and information literacy. The Windhoek Declaration recognizes the role of journalism in producing and disseminating public interest information, especially in times of crisis and emergencies, such as what the world and each country is experiencing today. These crisis situations are not only limited to the pandemic, to COVID-19 pandemic, but in some countries, including in Asia, the crisis can be political. According to the declaration, what is the role of governments and technology companies in preserving or promoting journalism as a public good? I will only highlight four, as there are many other roles which were identified in this report. The first is create an enabling environment for freedom of expression and access to information, which are two different things. Access to information, freedom of expression, by adopting legal measure in a transparent and consultative manner. Second, nurture a diversity of viable public, private, and community media. I would like to highlight public media, public service media. Many countries have public service media. Unfortunately, in our country, in the Philippines, we still have to set up our own public service broadcasting. What we have is state-owned, government-controlled broadcasting station, both radio and television. In ASEAN, I would dare to say that the PSB in Thailand is a good model which other ASEAN countries can adopt. Note also that the diversity includes community media. Could be community radio, it could be community newspapers where most of the members of PPI belong to. The third requirement is for governments to ensure, and this is important, for government to ensure flow of public funding to media through subsidies and advertisements in a fair, independent, and transparent manner. Remember, we're talking of taxes being given to media companies through subsidies and advertisements. And how do we ensure that media companies remain out of control by government, even if there is public funding? And the fourth is my favorite, mainstream media and information literacy. Government is called upon to mainstream media and information literacy and not to take the lead in disinformation or misinformation, which is common in many countries, including, or shall I say, especially in Asia. Let me give a short commercial. Am I media information literate citizens? Think critically, click wisely, was issued by UNESCO last October. This can be downloaded from our UNESCO website. This is the second edition of a book, which fortunately I'm one of the co-authors. So please download. How about the role of technology companies? Technology companies should ensure transparency in the conditions of service and human and automated systems in dealing with content. And I'm referring especially to content moderation. How transparent are technology companies, are social media platforms like Facebook and Google in dealing with content? Not only with content moderation, but are they very transparent when it comes to government requests or demand to take down some content? Do they report this to the public? How transparent are our technology companies? Number two, the declaration encourages technology companies to conduct human rights risk assessments. I'm aware that Facebook or Meta has sponsored or has commissioned the first human rights impact assessment in the Philippines in 2020. Again, you can download this and see the impact of Facebook and IG on human rights. I recall one of the documents that I read very carefully when I went back to Myanmar a few years ago was the Human Rights Impact Assessment Report conducted by Facebook for Myanmar. The third is Technology companies are encouraged to support information as a public good through partnerships, including donations and protection of journalists who are victims of attacks, right? So victims or at risk of online attacks. There are many other expectations, demands, or calls by this declaration, even for UN agencies, but I chose only governments and technology companies, considering that they play a very critical role in today's setting. I would like to emphasize that I would like to highlight that technology companies in the current and evolving media landscape, these technology companies have taken the role of the new gatekeepers, filtering, selecting, reconstituting information through algorithms. This is really fearsome because there is still no rules as to who should control technology companies. Whereas journalism has clear rules, laws, and code of ethics to follow for accountability to the public. Technology companies are the bigger ones are known for their acronym MANA, Meta or Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Alphabet, the mother company of Google. How transparent are they? Let me now go to the next topic. World trends in freedom of expression and media development. UNESCO has for the past many years been producing the world trends in freedom of expression and media development. The objective is to monitor the status of press freedom and safety of journalists and to report on the developments on these fields. UNESCO has produced 4 reports, 2014, 2015, 2017, and 2018, where I'm fortunate to be part of the editorial advisory board, and soon 2021, 2022. This is the cover of the 2021-2022 report, which will now be launched within the month of March, I hope. The topic, as you could see, the theme of this year's report is journalism is a public good. Let me go to the different trends mentioned in this report. There are just so many, but I would just highlight the more important or the more interesting one. Many of these I think you already know, not only know, but you feel. Trends in news media viability. Advertising revenues have shifted away from news outlets toward internet companies. Global newspaper advertising revenue dropped by half. By the way, Google and Meta receive approximately half of all global digital advertising, according to the source of UNESCO in this report. Between 2019 and 2020, newspaper circulation declined by 13% compared with less than 3% in 2018 and 2019. And based on a global survey of 1,406, to be exact, journalists from 125 countries, 2/3 or 65% of respondents felt less secure of their jobs. Are you part of the 2/3? Philippines was one of the respondent countries. Over 1/5 of the respondents experienced, sadly, a salary cut. This is the book quoted by UNESCO report, Journalism and the Pandemic, a Global Snapshot of Impacts. I would encourage you to please download a copy for the specifics, for the details of the study. The other trend is in media freedom, pluralism, and independence. Press freedom has demonstrably declined in 2012. And over the last 5 years, about 85% of the world's population have experienced a decline in press freedom in their country. Is your country part of this? 160 countries still have criminal defamation laws, including the Philippines. Very interesting, I noted that defamation laws have several variants now. No? What are these variants? Strategic lawsuits against public participation, libel tourism. Wow, pati libel, nagtuturista na, and cyber libel. Interesting, I Googled and I found out that the Philippines has a strategic lawsuits against public participation. It's called LAMP, issued no less by the Philippine Supreme Court. We still do not have libel tourism, but we definitely have cyber libel. Internet shutdowns reached a peak of 213 unique incidents in 2019. And that in 2019, many governments have government requests for content removal from major internet platforms have doubled. Since 2016, 57 laws adopted or amended across 44 countries contain overly vague language with disproportionate penalties and punishments. What are these overly vague language? It include national security, the usual. National security, public order, public safety, public health. And I even saw a draft law which says, quote, content that damage an individual's social understanding and livelihood, end of quote. I wonder what does it mean, right? So it's very important to look at these attempts to make use of vague language. According to the United Nations, general prohibitions on the dissemination of information based on vague and ambiguous ideas, including false news and non-objective information, are incompatible with international standards for restrictions on freedom of expression and should be abolished. End of quote. That declaration was issued in March 2017. Please be reminded of what are the so-called legal restrictions and what are the international standards for restrictions on freedom of expression. Please review the 3 principal tests mentioned in the ICCPR, International Code of Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, Article 19, Paragraph 3. It identifies 3 principles: principles of legality, principles of legitimacy, and the principles of necessity and proportionality. Very good text. Another very interesting finding is that the Gender Media Monitoring Project estimates that it will take another 67 years to close the average gender equality gap into news media. 67 years. Some of us may no longer be around to witness this event, to celebrate it. How about trends in safety of journalists? I identified a few. From 2016 to 2020, the Observatory of Killed Journalists by UNESCO recorded 400 work-related killings of journalists. According to CPJ, 274 journalists were imprisoned in 2020, the highest yearly total in 3 decades. Other media repression methods reported rising at record levels, including arbitrary detention, imprisonment, and threats of online and online violence. The impunity for killing of journalists remain, with only 13% of cases recorded since 2006 are considered judicially resolved. Let me now go. If you want details, you can visit the UNESCO website and take a look at the World Trends on Freedom of Expression 2021-2022. Let me now go to World Press Freedom Day. The theme is journalism under surveillance. How technology-based monitoring and surveillance impact on freedom of expression, safety of journalists, access to information, and privacy. An important reminder is the warning of Ms. Johanna Zuboff, Professor Emerita at Harvard Business School, of how technology companies are engaged in surveillance capitalism or mining users' information to predict and shape behavior and undermine autonomy and democracy. If you recall, our Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Maria Ressa, mentioned the book and quoted Zuboff during her Nobel Prize lecture, and also in her recent lecture at Princeton. Surveillance capitalism, for me, has led to commercialization of information and even journalism, instead of information and journalism as a public good. This is the book that I was referring to, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for Human Future at the New Frontier of Power. A very good reading. Before I end, let me go back to my earlier question. Should I end out of control with a question mark or with an exclamation point? My answer is neither, because I prefer my sentence to end with an ellipsis or 3 dots. The story of press freedom should not be allowed to end, as it requires a continuous defense and struggle. It is part of mankind's history. It is part of man's story to defend their freedom. There are a lot of good things being done by agencies, media organizations, citizens group, not to mention individuals like you and me who are fighting to keep the relevance and values of free and independent media. If we are smart, and I think we are, we should push back. All is not lost. Maraming salamat. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all.
Thank you, Sir Mon. That was a very comprehensive presentation from Mr. Mon Tuason. Very quickly, before I call our panel of reactors, some of the key points that were raised by Sir Mon. In the middle of a pandemic, we have a lot of concerns. We have primarily financial constraints. In the Philippines, for example, there were a lot of newspapers that had to close operations, especially among community newspapers. I think that is also true across the region. It's something that's not common only in the Philippines. But as he correctly pointed out, technology firms are earning, even as we ourselves, content producers, are feeling the brunt of this pandemic. The content moderators, though, are getting the money. There are more attacks on the media. There have been internet shutdowns. There's a spread of disinformation and misinformation. He mentioned other concerns as well, such as threats to the safety of journalists, increase in the cases of arbitrary detention, imprisonment, and killings, all despite the lockdowns that were brought about by the pandemic. The threats have continued. We are all excited because he gave us a glimpse of the topic for the World Press Freedom Day on May 3, which is journalism under surveillance. I think that will require another discussion for among our colleagues.
Big issue to tackle in the next
yeah.
activity. Joyce, may I? There's a question in the chat room. Very quickly. Yes, you can get the entire proceedings. We'll be posting them or uploading them in the in the YouTube channel of the Philippine Press Institute, so you guys can watch the show or the program over again. All right.
He ended it quite neatly, because he started with the question whether it's out of control question mark or out of control exclamation point. But then he said it should be out of control ellipsis, because the defense and the struggle for press freedom is something that is continuous and it does not end. It has to continue regardless of the context. Unfortunately, Mr. Daniel Bastard is not yet in. I think it's something to do with his time difference, because he's, again, as I said, he earlier mentioned that he will be in Paris today, so I'm not sure how. Maybe he could join us in a bit. So I'd like to call our first reactor. I'd like to call on Mr. Pichai Chuensuk Sawadi. Again, just to introduce him again, he's the former editor-in-chief of Bangkok Post. He's been involved in a lot of trainings for ASEAN journalists. It's a key mover, actually, to the ASEAN Media Forum. And he's also an advisor to Frontier Myanmar. Sir Pichai, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes,
sir. Loud and clear.
First of all, say hi to everybody. Let me thank Mr. Toison, Ramon Toison, for his presentation. And just off the cuff now, I really like the way he asked the question whether we are out of control, exclamation mark, or question. Just some observations. There's no question for the public good. The media, journalism should be free and independent. I'd just like to add two more phrases, perhaps. One is responsibility. We always seem to forget, well, at least certainly in Thailand, sometimes we talk about press freedom. We don't stress responsibility. And I know we can take and have a big discussion about what that means, but I firmly believe that, yes, there should be press freedom, there should be independent, but it must also be responsible. Now, how can it be independent? You people say, because a lot of governments say, oh, you're independent, you're free. My other phrase or word that I would like to stress is a journalist or a media company which does its job to serve the people, to make a difference, to speak on behalf of those who cannot speak, with no agenda, personal or otherwise. And here I stress no personal, no agenda. Unfortunately, in Thailand, and I'm not sure whether that's with other countries as well, since I've retired for now into its 6th year, the country has become very polarized. This is for Thailand. And there, the debate about press freedom, responsibility is seen differently from both sides. But then again, I think what really happens is, and it's not just a reflection of Thailand, I'm sure this is the situation across the region. It certainly is the case with the United States, for example, which is supposed to be the icon, the beacon of press freedom and media freedom. You can see it happening in the last 4 years, how, and I think that in my case, that's deteriorated, and it remains to be seen how that system upholds itself. In any case, I think I fully agree with a lot of the statements that Mr. Toison has said. in particularly what struck me was the role of the tech companies, tech companies, which has been a trend for the last 20 years, and their power and influence has increased exponentially to the detriment, I must add, sadly, to the traditional media in many countries, including Thailand, and have seen their demise, not just reduction of influence or loss of advertising. It has led to the demise of a number of media companies, or basically some of the media companies and traditional media is a shell of themselves who have no staff. I'll say specifically, if you know, the Nation newspaper, it had to close, at least the print version. That company has been taken over by another group of owners who have a certain political agenda. The Bangkok Post, likewise, which I served for 35 years, 22 years as an editor. We had 3 newspapers at one stage. Both Thai language newspapers have closed. Only the Bangkok Post remains, and still it's a skeleton of itself because it's lost so much staff and it's been influenced a lot by advertisers. So the traditional, the technology media surely have become the gatekeepers, replacing us or as gatekeepers. Now, is that such a bad thing? Because if you look back and have being honest with yourself, the traditional media were the gatekeepers, and who gave you that right? Now, the difference over the last 20 years, because of the rise of the technology companies, is that people can have directly produce news themselves. They can say what they want. They can reach out. And of course, that brings a lot of other problems of fake news, lack of information, blah, blah, blah. And we all know that, and that's another discussion. But I think he's made a very good point that the gatekeepers now are the tech companies with the algorithms, and this is definitely a challenge, and we can have a discussion how we meet that challenge later on. What I do like is the term that he used, media viability. And what does that mean? Now, we can have this further discussion if you want. We can talk about Frontier Myanmar, but not quite now, because there, since my involvement with Frontier, we've stopped the print edition. It's now only an online edition. But how does it survive? Media sustainability means media viability, and media viability means you do not always have to make a profit. If the big companies or the big companies which invest in your media companies decide not to produce the newspapers anymore, how can you survive? You have to survive by being viable. And there are various combinations and options for that. But it does not mean, in my view, is to always open your hand for help. But we can have that separate discussion later. I fully agree in Mr. Tuazon's conclusion that the fight must continue, and it has to continue. And I would suggest that although I'm retired from the media scene in Thailand for the last 6 years, despite the fact that I may have had some offers to start my own operations, which I haven't because I've had, my time, I'm still happy to help Frontier Myanmar where I can, when I can, and out there, that's separate altogether. But I think the defense of free, independent, if I may also add, responsible journalism with no personal agenda remains the responsibility of each and individual one of the journalists in their hearts. Why do we do this, or why have we done this? It's because we want to make a difference. We want to act as a voice for those who do not have access to the internet, and there's a lot of people out there, for a voice for people who cannot speak because they face suppression. I think that fight continues. And even though, I guess, if you ask me, if I may share a personal thing, why after retirement would I want to help Frontier Myanmar? It's because I guess in my own way, it's always been wanting to make a little difference if I can. And I believe that I could probably make, by helping a media company which has the same philosophy as I do, to survive a really, really horrible situation in their home country. I would rather do that when it's very difficult to move as in Thailand the way it is now. That's all I have for you to share, Joyce. I'm happy to answer any other questions. I'll be really glad to listen to what our other co-reactors have. And I'd like welcome to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pichai. Interesting points that you raised. In particular, correct the thing about responsibility. Media also has to be accountable, right? It's also part of the lay of the land. We cannot keep on asking for concessions without being responsible ourselves, or pushing for our rights without being responsible. Interesting also that you raised the issue of whether we are ceding our role as gatekeepers. Are we ceding it, or is it being taken away from us forcibly by these tech companies? And because as a segue to the next reactor, I really feel the passion that when you said that journalism should be able to help when it's difficult. And I think a particular example is what you're doing for Frontier Myanmar. And now for our second reactor, we have someone actually from Myanmar, a good friend and classmate of mine, Mon Myat. Hi, Mon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for inviting me for this event, Joyce. And also, I would like to say Swadika to Pichai, because I used to write for Bangkok's Spectrum session. And I think this session is no more available now. So that's sad, very sad. But anyway, I would like to, in this session, I would like to briefly reflect Burma Myanmar media situation since after the coup d'etat last year. And as you all know, Myanmar Press Freedom Index is in decline. And the coup d'etat in February 2021 took Myanmar media backward to the same situation as before 2010. A few print media left to survive, and they published daily newspaper. A few, I mean, only one or two, they survive, and they publish daily newspaper. Independent media outlets such as the ARD, Myanmar, DBB, and major ethnic media outlets are running from exile now. For many journalists, reporting on the ground has become impossible. A freelance photojournalist who took a photo of the day of silent strike in Yangon was arrested and tortured to death next day. One journalist was killed during an artillery strike in the current state along the Thai-Burma border. According to the reporting for ASEAN, at least 120 journalists and media workers in Myanmar have been arrested since the beginning of the coup, with 46 currently detained as of January 26 this year. 40 of the arrested journalists were charged with violating Section 505B or A of the Penal Code, under which it is a crime to cause or intend to cause member of the government to be disobedient or disloyal. The junta also continues to impose its restriction on internet use, preparing to adopt a new cybersecurity law that would ban the use of virtual private network or VPNs to access banned sites such as mainly Facebook and other social media. I'd like to read a few details regarding the trials and verdicts from the recent report published by a local journalism organization. During the early of the coup, the military junta charged journalists under the Penal Code, Article 505A. But later in August 2021, journalists are being charged with violation of Penal Code Article 71, Unlawful Association Act, for journalists who had contact with the National Unity Government, NUG, which was formed in exile, and also committee representing CRPH. It's also formed with the elected MP in exiles. And anyone who contact to the exile government and exile parliamentary members will be arrested with the Unlawful Association Act. And also, if people are contact with the local defense force as a news source, such as when we are covering news about fighting in different area, when we contact to the local defense force. So any journalist who contact to the local defense force will be arrested and given sentence to the Unlawful Association Act, and also with the act of sedition. And now the military has added charges under the anti-terrorism law, sedition, and violation of the Section 5 of the Explosive Substance Act, which carries a sentence of between 10 to 20 years of imprisonment. Almost all punishments involve imprisonment of up to 3 to 20 years. Since October 2021, the military junta has also charged journalists with violation of the counterterrorism law. Journalists who are being
Or
detained
we'd like
in
to
Yangon
ask
and
our
Mandalay
participants to put themselves on mute so as
to
not to
easily
interfere.
get the service of defense lawyers, but journalists from other townships have limited access to defense lawyers. So now Myanmar media are mainly relying on citizen journalists and stringers in conflict areas or civil war-torn areas. Even in Yangon, we have the news of bomb blasts every day. Armed guerrilla attacks targeted to Myanmar security forces frequently occur in Yangon and Mandalay. Villages and rural areas in different regions such as Sagaing, Chin, Magwe, and other ethnic areas still express their strong resistance against the military regime in the form of peaceful protests or rural guerrilla attacks, warfare. So on the other hand, the regime used airstrikes to defeat local militant groups everywhere. So those conflicts increased more internally displaced people across the country. And it created scarcity of food and health hazards, especially in the wave of COVID-19 and Omicron. So, just to sum up, while Myanmar is heading toward a fair state, it is impossible for Myanmar media to survive and to continue reporting the ground situation. So that's the brief reflection of Myanmar media facing today. Thank you all. If you have any question, I'm ready to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mon. And I hope where you are right now is a safe place for you. I know that, it's very difficult really to cover on the ground in Myanmar. Some of the points that she raised were, the use of laws to clamp down on journalists. Even the anti-terrorism law was already used, right, to charge journalists in Myanmar. In fact, sometimes I had to check the Facebook of my journalist friends in Myanmar because some of them were very active as well in the protest actions against the junta. And she said that if Myanmar continues on its path towards becoming a failed state, then it will really become impossible for Myanmar media to survive. We have some questions, but we will hold them off until after we finish all 4 reactors. And at this point, I'd like to call Mr. Thien Ferin. He is a young but journalist of the Khmer news site, Fime Fime. Hi, Thien. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Joy. Do you hear me well?
It's a bit
muffled.
Not muffled, yeah.
It's muffled a bit.
Perhaps if you would like to remove your headset,
or
because
earphones,
sometimes it interferes.
Do you hear me well?
Yeah,
that's
one.
better, yeah.
Due to my internet connection, maybe.
Okay.
But this one's better, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon to everyone, and I want to reflect the press media in Cambodia that the media company in Cambodia maybe have many, but the thing is that they are partially free. They are not absolutely free for the press media in Cambodia, and they have some restricted. And that the news in Cambodia cannot spread widely, but it may be one of our concern. And another concern is online media, that because of the technology age in Cambodia have more online media, that the one thing of concern is the fake spread news. Most of media, they may have a license, but some, I don't know how can I call the journal citizen journalism, or maybe they sometimes they write the blog or on Facebook, but the thing, those news are fake and spread to people, so they affect the life of people in Cambodia. And one more thing, those news is published in the purpose of earning money, like AI, no AI, like IA, instant article, like they publish on Facebook. Most of some of them are fake news, and they, because of the fake, people is interested in that, and they click on that, and most of them could earn a lot of money. And another thing is copyright, because I don't know how they, in Cambodia, how many people can write new well or follow the journalism snake, but some media has copied other content to post on their page. So it could affect the company or the name of the company. Yes. And that's all for me. If you have any question, you can ask.
Thank you, Thien. I think what you raised were also very important. The rise of disinformation in your country, and how some people turn to Facebook and write, what do you call them there? IA, instant articles, right?
Yes.
Yes, and how they use it to monetize or even spread disinformation or misinformation. For our last reactor, I'd like to call Mr. Wayu Diatmika. Just to introduce him again properly, he is the CEO of Tempo Digital and founder of SecFacta, which is the fact-checking collaboration platform in Indonesia. Wayu, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Ariel. It's an honor and privilege to share the panel with Mr. Ramon Tuazon, with the other panel of reactors, Mr. Pichai, Tian, Mon. It's great that we have this forum to share insights and to compare the situation in our countries, the press freedom, the press situation in our respective countries, and hopefully we can get new spirit and new ideas to keep the struggle, as Mr. Tuazon said. I just would like to react on three different areas of the very insightful presentation from Mr. Tuazon. First of all, I think the theme it's really important for us nowadays. Journalism as public goods, and how as a public goods we need public trust. One important notes on that is what I'm seeing, and what we in Indonesia are quite worried to see, is that in some of the changes, some of the innovations, some of the new model that we implement to adapt to our new digital landscape might hamper or could take away those trusts from the media. Let me give you some example. The use of native ads, for example. We try to switch the advertising model to native ads because advertisers don't want to get ad block from users. But the fact that we are using this new model could make it more difficult for the public to differentiate which one is journalism content and which are advertising content, and that in the end could hamper and could destroy public trust in the media, which is really, really important to make sure that we are still seen as public goods. The proliferation of programmatic ads and the content of those ads also is another challenge for us, because sometimes the content of those ads are not filtered. Sometimes it contains hoax, misinformation, manipulation, and we cannot guarantee public any one of our user can differentiate between those very similarly look like news article to ads. And I think impression-based business model, where media competing for more eyeballs, for more traffic, is also quite detrimental for building public trust in the media. So we have to be very careful when we implement new business model, when we adapt to digital, new digital format. We have to think, how is that going to affect public trust in our content? Because if we lose public trust, and it shows in the latest Edelman Trust Barometer indicator this year that the media is losing public trust. So this is a very worrying sign. The second area that I would like to react is on the theme of this year, World Press Freedom Day, Journalism Under Surveillance. And I think it's a very important and timely theme. In Indonesia, we are seeing more and more doxing cases where, journalists who are seen publishing critical article to the government, or trying to investigate, or trying to just fact check statement or information, and some people don't like it, they can get easily all of their private personal information can be uploaded to the internet with manipulation. They get harassed, they get bullied. The fact that we are using social media, that we spend our time on screen more and more these days during the pandemic, make journalists more vulnerable to this kind of attacks. And we need to bring our heads together and try to think how we can prevent this from happening. Because if we lose the security factors, if we are not able to work safely, it is very difficult to come up and produce quality investigative articles. And on the regulation front in Indonesia, we are also seeing new government regulation trying to make sure that the government can remove articles, can remove contents with, as Mr. Tuazon said, is with a very vague reasons, with a very vague pretext. And it is something that we need to anticipate, because it's digital censorship in a sense. So we need to be also try to anticipate that front. Lastly, I think I would like to bring the discussion forward to what we can do next. What should we do? And I'd like to borrow Mr. Tuazon's framework when he said that there are three at least variable in our effort to make sure that we keep press freedom striving, which is the media viability, public literacy, and tech transparency. I think in those three areas, we need to coordinate ways and concrete programs. How can we ensure media viability in Indonesia? We are trying to build more accelerators and incubators for new startup in media, because sometimes in the media, journalists always think about content, and now we cannot just think about content. We need to think about the business side, the technological side, and we need to experiment on new ways to build that capability. So having more investment, having more partnership in accelerator hubs, incubators hub, to make sure that we can find and nurture the best and brightest minds in the media industries is one way to go. In literacy, we need to also involve the non-journalists in in the effort to increase digital literacy. Joyce mentioned I founded checkfacta.com, and last year we realized that we don't have quite an impact that we need in terms of fighting misinformation and disinformation. So this year we decided we have to work with non-journalists. We cannot just talk among ourselves. We need to talk to schools. We need to talk to academics. We need to talk to housewives group, public communities members, and all that have their own language. They have their own perspective. They have their own idioms when it comes to hoax. We cannot just rely on our own concepts and methods anymore. Lastly, tech transparency. I think in this regards, we need to involve all stakeholders because as we all realize, tech companies have become so powerful. This is a giant effort to make sure that we can have algorithm transparency. We know how contents are distributed and how it can reach the right audience, the targeted segment of the audience. It's a huge work, but if we do it together, I think we'll reach the goals that we want. Thank you so much, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Wayu. Interesting points that he raised. I think this one we should all remember. For us to be a public good, we first have to have public trust. That's very important. And he also acknowledged that, in our effort to survive, some of our decisions erode also that public trust. In particular, our switch to advertising models from the traditional ads, display ads, to native ads. In native ads, I think it's how you call it in Indonesia. In the Philippines, we'd probably call that advertorial. That's the one that does not look like an advertisement. It looks like a real story, but it's actually a paid story. There's also the stiff competition for eyeballs. That's sometimes it makes us lose our editorial judgment in the process. And most importantly, we have to tap stakeholders in fighting disinformation. That is something that we in the Philippine Press Institute, with the support, of course, of Seidel Foundation, we're very proud of doing our scholastic program. Just for everyone's information, we bring the scholastic program to different schools across the country, at least 2 schools per month. And then we do media and information literacy. And we also teach them, like what we did at IWPRYU, we teach them also the fact-checking tools, the simple tools to see if something is fake or not. So there, I think we had a very, very good discussion among our reactors as well as from Mr. Tuason earlier. Before I go to the Q&A portion, and I'd like to ask our participants, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in our chat box. I'd like first to present a little slide that we prepared because we asked our participants to fill up a question, to answer a question rather, on what is the most pressing challenge to press freedom in your respective countries. And here are some of the top 10 answers that we got. So there's red tagging of journalists, digital divide. Can we go back? Red tagging from the Philippines. If it's something that's an unfamiliar concept, it means when you're red tagged, you're being accused of being a communist or being part of the communist rebel because you are an activist or you're seen as supporting activists. Next one is digital divide, undue political influence, unprofessional practices, shortage of financial resources, and poor performance of media watchdogs. Interesting. This is I think the only answer that brought up the issue of having the need for media watchdogs from Nepal.
So
right?
Joyce, we have participants from Nepal as well, right?
Yeah, from Nepal.
So, yeah,
we
because
also
they
have from
registered.
Malaysia.
Yeah. apart from the ones mentioned already. So welcome, Nepal.
Yes. What's the next one? What's the third one? Yeah, proliferation of fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. Yes, I think this is true not just in the Philippines but across the region. Next one. From Thailand, a lack of understanding of the proper role of media in a new digital age. Yeah, what is the role of media in a new digital age? Do our values change just because the platform changes? Or, journalism is journalism regardless of platform, right, Ariel?
Yeah.
Next
and wherever
one.
you are.
Yeah, wherever you are, wherever platform you are. Historical revisionism. Sorry, that was quite fast. Via systematic disinformation. Yes, from the Philippines. Next one, please. From Myanmar, insecurity and the military government's strict control of all media, online and offline media. I think if the Myanmar example taught us anything, it's that, when the government wants to clamp down on democracy, the first thing that it clamps down on is media. That tells you how important media is in a functioning democracy. Next one. Yeah, media companies owned by big businesses, yes. Politicians, government officials tend to compromise journalistic prerogatives and press freedom and ferreting the truth. If at any instance a legitimate issue against their businesses or political positions is raised in public, yes, media ownership is a critical issue and challenge.
Especially in these forthcoming elections in the Philippines.
Yes.
Joyce, right?
In our context in the Philippines, because we have an elections on May 9. So that is, you can actually feel that one. Repressive laws, hostile government, and media ownership. See, media ownership is really a factor. From Malaysia. Next one, how many more do we have? I think 2 or 3 more.
India.
Truth is from India. Truth is sabotaged. Sorry, sweetheart, move a bit. Paid media threats to journalists.
Yeah, let's say hi to India.
Yeah, hello to our colleagues from India who are with us today. That's a two-pronged answer. Media who are on the take and media who are on the receiving end of threats. The press no longer has the freedom to voice out the truth because of these oppositions. Prior restraint, libel and privacy lawsuits, leaks, investigations, subpoenas for confidential news gathering materials, and intimidation of sources. Okay, I think that's the last one. Okay, so those are the top 10 answers collated by our team. I think it's a good addition to our earlier presentations and for our discussion as well.
And segue to our open forum at this point, Joyce, right?
Yeah. So at this point, we'd like to call on Mr. Tuason, Wayu, Monmon, Thien, and Sir Pichay to be ready for the questions.
All right, Joyce, shall we begin with a comment from our colleague in Malaysia?
Yes.
So I'll read it very quickly.
Sure, please.
Okay, in Malaysia, we prepared a draft bill for a media council. I'm sure you have read this already, but we're reading this aloud. Under Act of Parliament, we decided to define public good to exclude some restrictions on the media for a code of conduct that is scheduled in the bill. The public good includes, but is not confined to detecting or exposing crime or etc. All right. Any comments, Joyce? Shall we get comments from our panelists on this?
What's your take on this, sir? Do we need to regulate or even define through the government what is public good? Is that something that will work to our advantage as journalists?
If I may, can I share, Joyce?
Yes, please.
In Thailand, we've had the two major media organizations. There's the Thai Journalists Association, and there's another Press Council of Thailand, which is a combination of of media companies, editors, even academics and outsiders in the Press Council of Thailand. But the founding principle of media monitoring has always been self-monitoring. Having said that, however, and we've fought this since, in the 1980s, it's a long time, 30, 40 years. But I have to admit, how do media monitor themselves? And we've done not a very good job. I say that because there have been examples where there is a process with the Thai Press Council. People can complain, file a complaint saying that this media report or this company or this newspaper is biased. There is an investigation process committee set up, not just compiling of media, but also outsiders. And then when a decision is made by the council that this story by this newspaper is not professional, has not ethical, and what are we supposed to do? Theoretically, all the media members should publish this decision in their newspapers. I've never seen it done once. Sad to say. This is the problem of not, we call for media monitoring our own, and yet we don't act upon it. So how the hell can we expect the trust from the public? Number one. There are a number of examples of this. So while I do believe that there has to be monitoring of the media's ethics, what governments do is they use this as an excuse to say, they take it one step further. In Thailand now, there's been recent proposal, we want to license journalists. You must get a license to be a journalist, right? Which takes it even one step further. Why? Because there has been a lack of trust by the mainstream media not to monitor themselves. And then when just take another example. When one of the press council takes strong action against one newspaper, what do? They leave the council. So the question is, if you want to come up with the laws, if you want to come up with and want to fight for your own freedom and your responsibility, you must show some responsibility. Otherwise, you will lose the trust. You cannot gain people's trust if you don't perform in an ethical way. And I'm talking about members of the media companies themselves. Now, I know this is difficult because in Thailand, a lot of the big traditional media companies are owned by big, powerful other companies, like in the Philippines, like in other Indonesia, where the media owners have other businesses and other business interests. Okay, so what do we do? So as far as the law of the media council and stuff, I think it's worth the fight to have your own monitoring and have no government control. It needs to have involvement from the academics, from other sectors, to at least give them the voice. But when the push comes to shove of how do you punish unethical journalism by members of your council, you better have a good answer where you don't lose the trust. This is just sharing from the inability of the Thai media to be able to do, at least in the council, to do that. They do other good things, don't get me wrong. They have other activities, training sessions, and all these things, which is fine, which is what we're supposed to do. But when push comes to shove,
where accountability is concerned.
Yeah, the proof is in the pudding. Now, if I may add, that's on one part. So I won't go any further than that. But if I just wanted to share that, I'll tell you a very frank. I'll tell it as it is. I'm no longer in the media in Thailand. Sometimes I wish I still was, but no, the time is up. It's time to do something else. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chai. That's a very honest answer.
I know. Yeah. We can't stress enough the importance of media viability. The viability that is not equal to financial or economic viability. But you also mentioned about responsibility, which is really a touch point for all discussion on ethical, responsibility, etc. Are you okay with licensing journalists? Because way back, many years back, I remember there were some quarters in the Philippines who would propose, for journalists to take board exam, etc. Is that would that make if we get licenses, would that make journalists responsible, even more responsible, ethical?
If I may just add just quickly, it's
Yeah,
the
sure.
responsibility of each newspaper company or media company to make sure that their journalists are ethical. Now, you can have as many laws as you want. And quite tell you frankly, you can say you cannot do this, you can't accept gifts, you cannot accept white envelopes and stuff like that, which happens, and it still happens. Excuse me. Let's be frank, all right? But if I know about it, if I find out about it, it's my job to make sure that that person is no longer there in that profession, or certainly not in my media organization. It starts at the media company themselves. It starts at the news editors making sure. Now, of course, nobody is perfect. Nobody's expected to know who is taking what or who's getting extra money for this and that. You know, come on. It also starts with paying people decent salaries.
Right.
Exactly. That was what I was waiting to hear. It's a labor issue and an ethical
It
issue.
depends on paying salaries. Now, I go to Pak Wahyu's point about the problems of the big media companies and advertorials and things like that appearing in the media. Okay, what's the business model? Okay, if you don't have big companies backing you up, all right. Now, if I may just share very briefly also my views here, because I may have to go soon. But quite frankly, the big companies, you know, the newspaper, the media is a small portion of a bigger business.
Yeah.
If that's viable, okay, and there are certain things you don't cover, that's unspoken. I mean, come on, I'll be honest with you. That's why some media company, some big companies in Thailand have their own TV stations, have their own media companies. So what's the answer? If advertising is dropping by, what's the business model?
Right.
The keyword viability does not necessarily mean it's profitable.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to mean and should not mean you lose money. Perhaps the model is to get support for donors on certain projects which help promotes, if I may say so, promotes good journalism, fact-checking, these sorts of things. You know, you're a small operation, but you want to fact check, you want to hire people for certain things. Maybe there'll be some organization out there who wants to promote this. Don't organize a seminar and talk about press freedom. What you got to deal with what's real on the ground. What's real on the ground is getting some funding to hire people to pay them something. It's project-based, yes. Fact-checking, a certain thing about women and things like that, which you have to do. That may be one thing. If that's not all. And don't expect it to come from the website where the algorithm favors, you know, Google and Facebook for all the ads, right? They take most of the money. Unless you have a real good YouTuber who can dance around with the news, that's not going to cause the clicks.
No.
I don't think we want to go there, Chai.
No, that's not that we don't want to do that.
Okay, that's a very good. Sorry, yeah, you finish.
Let me just finish.
Sure.
You do several projects, training programs, get funding to support that so that you can build up your team. Yet at the same time, you need to explore what's unique as a revenue stream away from advertising. And these are the smaller companies, smaller operations. Build their own community. We've heard that. And you can build your own community by having subscriptions. You know, we're not the New York Times, we're not the Washington Post, we're not the Financial Times, we're not Bloomberg, but each in their area can have their own subscriptions perhaps and build it from there. Yeah. I am aware that each country's economic situation, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, is not the same. But I would say that if you can have an operation which can have some financial grants or assistance from overseas, you also try to build up your resources, your people. Your brand is who you are. It's not the name. It's who you are as a team of journalists. That is the brand. And if that brand oozes with integrity and trust, people will come to you and read your stuff. Now, it could also be a community of an email system, which means you don't always have to be on Facebook and Instagram. You build up a community of people who want to pay for good journalism, ethical journalism, long-form journalism, maybe.
Sure.
And I don't go into the details, but I guess you can hear me saying that these are some of the formula which Frontier is using now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pichai. Yeah.
Okay,
very good
but
point raised.
I'm not the person to say that.
No.
Mon will know, Sunny Sway
Yeah.
knows most of that, not me. I don't get myself involved in day to day. I'm too old for that.
We'll be asking them as well, but very good points right there. Remember, Joyce, in the
Yeah.
pandemic, for the longest time, even before the pandemic, we've been talking about a viable business model for, especially for smaller newspapers outside the national capital region, and a good way to, a good reflection at this point in this time of
But
pandemic.
if I just add one
moving
point,
forward,
to get forward grants, to get sponsored grants from international agencies, the key is transparency.
Yeah.
I'm using this money for this purpose.
Yeah.
This is how I'm accounting for it. If you do that, you will get the
You're
trust.
good.
Again, it all goes back to the trust and transparency.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Transparency and good or excellent journalism, for that matter, right?
Mon is raising her hand. I will call her, but just very quickly, I'd like to point out, tried all those were good points. But again, I'd like to emphasize, journalism is perhaps the only profession that does not require you to have a journalism degree. How much more requiring us to, pass a test to call ourselves a journalist. So I think there's really a pushback from our colleagues as to regulated or government regulation to accredit journalists. Mon, you want to say add to it?
Oh yes, I just want to say that I totally agree with Sir Pichai, especially in Myanmar right now. We have only two media left. One is the regime media, states media, and opposition media. And journalism ethics is the most important thing in Myanmar right now. We need it right now because we know mostly only fake news from the state media side and from the opposition media side. We are hunger of the true news, especially in this time. And as you said, as Sir Pichai said, viability of the business model in Myanmar right now is, hopeless because media can survive inside the country only by the support of the regime or maybe the support of the international media institutions such as Internews or IS, Institute of Media, something, a media institution. They can support the opposition media, but they have to, be very careful supporting opposition, independent media. If they support the opposition, only opposition, they will not get, they will not control the media journalism standard anymore. So that's very important, things we need right now, media journalism ethic and the standard of the professional journalists. We have to keep that in mind. And instead of we are building the business model, we have to keep our journalism standard in this time. Yeah.
Thank you, Mon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sir Mon is raising Sir Ramon Tuason is raising his hand. And then after Sir Mon Tuason, perhaps you could also share the innovations that you've been doing where digital media is concerned. Sir Mon first, and then Wayu.
Thank you, Joyce. Just want to remind everybody that we may be romanticizing traditional media. It is about time that we shift focus on online media. It could be online news media or whatever, but the platform of choice today is online platform. In the issues, there are some commonalities, but there are some distinct issues that only exist in the online media, particularly the role of algorithm. And we should be very careful because now we are in a situation where we read news online through Facebook feeds, through other platforms. So not that we don't want to save our traditional print or broadcast media, but we have to take reality. We have to focus, we have to give much attention to online media. Now, let me go to what Pichai mentioned earlier about responsibility. I totally agree. The formula is free and independent. plus responsible and accountable media. Sometimes we miss on the accountability. But free, independent, responsible, and accountable media leads to public trust. There is no public good if there is no public trust. If people do not understand and appreciate why there is still media. And it is important to go into self-regulation. The gold standard, again, the gold standard for accountability and responsibility is to go self-regulation. If you don't engage in self-regulation, you are inviting government to come in. And that is a very serious problem. Are there models of self-regulation? I think they are. No? In fact, I was looking at some models because there are some self-regulatory bodies which were created through legal edict, through law, through regulation, which I think is very difficult. As in the case of Indonesia now, they want to amend their law on press council, but they are not too sure if the environment is correct to open up the law and amend it and so on and so forth. So self-regulation is still very important. Now, having said that, Julie mentioned about what do you do with technology companies. A group of independent thinkers have been endorsing the need to create an independent, free, and I may add, responsible regulatory body which will look into the activities of technology companies. Again, I said independent, autonomous regulatory body. Because who has the mandate to do this except government, except that regulation by government is a double-edged sword. So what do you do to protect regulatory mechanisms addressing concerns related to technology companies? One is make sure that those who will be part of this independent body are chosen in a very transparent process with people participation. Number two is that it should be multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder, not only represented by one group, but they should be vetted that they don't have any interest or they don't protect the interests of the state nor the technology companies that they represent, but represent only protect the interests of the public. The report created, I recall the working group of infodemics has identified very good strategies and very good recommendations on how to regulate technology companies. Incidentally, this group is co-chaired by Maria Ressa, who has been lobbying for regulation, independent regulation of technology companies. What other things can we do? They're being done now, Julie, like oversight body. Facebook and Google has created their oversight body. Unfortunately, they're still lacking in field. You know? They have to be empowered further so that they can push back technology companies. The bottom line I would like to say is, let us take a look at the online platform because these are the platform of today. These are the platform of young people. We may be a passing generation, but let me quote Mon, an activist friend from Yangon. She told me, internet is my birthright. You can't just take it away from me. But if we don't do something, we don't push back the technology companies, you won't have your birthright. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Mon. Very interesting points that you raised. I really like what you said, that self-regulation is the gold standard where regulation is concerned. I think, yeah, we should not cede that right to the government. Why you? Sorry, I asked you to, because I know you're very involved in some of the innovations in in Tempo?
Yeah, I thank you for that question. But before I respond to that, I'd like to just give a brief comments on the previous point made by Kun Pichai and Mr. Tuazon on the licensing and the self-regulatory body. As you know, the Indonesian Press Council is our self-regulatory body. It's under the Indonesian press law back from 1999, right after the resignation of then President Suharto. And Kun Pichak was very correct when he said that the key is how the media stakeholder obey the press council decision. But because without that, then there is no credibility of the press council itself. And that's what, going back to the question from Malaysia, is what our Malaysian colleagues are trying to build with the media council bill. The thing is, a few years ago, Indonesian Press Council introduced the licensing for journalists, the thing that we just discussed, and we believe it's not the right thing to do, because the context in Indonesia, there's more than 40,000 journalists without, without ways to differentiate which one are, the ethical journalists, which one are just, journalists who use this profession for their own self-interest. So the licensing then is a mechanism introduced by the self-regulatory body to make sure that the public trust on journalists and media and press freedom in general is still intact. So in that sense, we are facing this very dilemma. On one hand, we believe that there is no license required, there is no test required because this is an open profession. But on the other hand, we need this kind of mechanism to make sure that the public can have concrete ways to identify and differentiate real journalists, ethical journalists with the non-journalists. So I think it's a very interesting case study from Indonesia. On the digital innovation, I agree with Mr. Tuazon that this is the future, this is the new platform, and Jakarta Post, Koran Tempo both closed its print edition last year, some because of the financial constraint, but I think the strategy is also moving to digital completely to make sure that we embrace this new platform. And we introduce chatbots, for instance, to make sure that people get personalized content on their chat application. Now we have it online, one of the biggest chat platform for millennials in Indonesia, where people can get personalized, can even ask questions to the bot and get answers about what's trending today, what's the news today on the politics, on the economy. So I think the ability of new news publishers to adapt and to offer personalized service to the readers is one of the key to survive in the digital era. I think that's one innovation that comes to mind. We also is rebooting our websites to make sure that each user will have different experience based on their habit and behavior in the past.
It's a matter of customizing really the experience of your users. I'd like to call on Thien because Philippine, the Kimmer news site where he works in is purely online, right, Thien?
Yes, Joy. Our platform is online, and mostly we get income from sponsor, and so we can spread the news to our audience. And because of our income from sponsor, we can spread a good news, or we can promote ethnical journalism to our audience. But the thing is that some online platform, they don't have sponsor, but they depend on monetize, like instant article. So the thing does the owner of that platform they have ethnic or they have degree in journalism? So they might have some problem with that, and they can spread the fake news, or they can copy article from our platform or other platform. So that the thing. But one not different from senior journalists. I can say the first thing is we need to enhance ourselves to spread the news. If we don't enhance ourselves or build trust in our company, so our audience cannot trust us and they don't want to view or read our article anymore. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Thin. We have a question in our chat box from Carol Lee. With regards to disinformation and malinformation, especially in relation to social media platforms, some suggest to collaborate with tech companies. What are your thoughts on these? Since tech companies are not media outfits and insist that they are mere platforms, they fall outside of the media companies are expected or hope to agree to self-regulation, do fact-checking, and be responsible for the content on their platforms. Would like to take on this. Although Facebook, I understand, already has fact checkers, right?
Yeah, I can probably add some background on that question.
Thank you, Ayu. Yeah, go ahead.
In Indonesia, we have Facebook third-party fact checkers, where Tempo is one of the media involved since 3 or 4 years ago. So Facebook as a platform in this mechanism gave us a dashboard so we can have access to the potentially mis and disinformation on the content. Then the third-party fact checkers fact check those articles, and that can use as a signal for Facebook to flag certain potentially mis and disinformation content on their platform. So Facebook in itself is still not accepting the content themselves. They collaborate with us in the news media as the fact checkers. I think that is one of the way to make sure that technology platforms, social media platforms, free from mis and disinformation, and that also create opportunity for publishers to make sure that their credibility and their news content also acknowledged and used for the public goods, in a sense, because then we help the public to recognize and identify content that could be harmful for them.
Thank you, Ayu. Does anyone want to add to the question by Carol?
Yes. Hi, Joyce. Let me add a little bit for the question.
Yes, Mon.
For the media from Myanmar, they usually use Facebook as a platform to disseminate news, and they mainly do fact checking and for all contents. It's a main responsibility of the media organization itself, no other organization, but just a few medias, they are doing that fact checking time to time, not regularly, but time to time. If there's many false news, they just trying to use this fact checking, and then they trying to make a news truthful, and trying to identify this is fake news because of this evidence, something like that. So media like DBB, they do some kind of fact checking time to time. But we have also concerned that if the government totally shut down the social media like Facebook, what are the alternative media we can use for the news gathering? So media organization like DBB, BBC or VOA, they have an alternative media platform as a radio. So we have to go back to the old age, like we're listening to
you go
radio.
back to the mainstream.
Yeah. Because
old school media.
Old school new media. Because we experienced after the coup in last year, they shut down all the internet. So that is why we rely on the radio. We have to buy the radio to listen to news from BBC or VOA or DVB. So radio is another alternative media for us right now. Thank you.
Yeah. Digital media is only as good if there is one, electricity, and two, internet connection. The moment the government decides to cut off both, there you go. You have to go back to old school media.
Exactly.
Actually, what I just want to push the question a little bit more for the experience in Myanmar. More than disinformation and misinformation, there's the very real threat to the lives of journalists in Myanmar. Were there how did the community respond to this? I mean, of course, I understand some of the newspapers had to fold up, had to close. I think you said there's only two now that remain in existence, right? So how do you help people get the information that they need to know?
Actually, people mainly rely on the exile media, such as the ARD or DBB or the BBC, BOA. They also stay doing regularly, reporting regularly. But people use Facebook as kind of citizen media of the citizen journalists. So something happening in any places, citizen journalists post it first, and then the news media outlet, they trying to verify that news tip off, and then they make sure that it's the true news. Something like there is something fighting and how many people arrested and killed, then they try to verify these from the citizen journalists to publish in their mainstream media. That's what they used to do. Yeah, what they are doing right now. And individual people, they are using Facebook is also very dangerous because Facebook is not it's banned inside the country. So if the government find out we post anti military regime content on our own Facebook, and then we can be arrested. Not only arrested, but also they can take our properties. They can lock down our house and then take our property. So if we're taking our own risk. If we want to post something, if we want to, share news about, what's happening around our neighborhood, then we have to take our own risk. Yeah, that's what we are doing now. Yeah.
Sorry, Steve, may I share just a little bit?
Of course, Sir Pichai, go ahead.
What Frontier did when the coup happened at the beginning is no more bylines. No more bylines.
That is interesting.
You cannot, your life is more important than your ego.
Yeah.
No more bylines. Number two, when an incident occurred in a certain area, a certain neighborhood, a reporter may live there. And of course, they'll know that. But then when the coup happened, from my understanding, as it was explained to me, there are a lot of informants around. So neighborhoods got very cautious. So reporters were not allowed to go beyond certain areas to a different area because it was not safe. A stranger going into an area of conflict could be identified or accused of being an informant, and that could be dangerous to them. So what happened was they had to be in a certain area, no bylines. And as Monmon said, it's very difficult, especially with the monitoring of Facebook and to double check. Before you can have a video chat, you can have a line call with sources and things like that. That's even more difficult now. To double and to verify, even if you change the platform to WhatsApp or to Telegram or to whatever to try to verify. That's why the government is trying to shut down internet, shut down mobile phone access, because that's the way to double check and to verify the information. But that's just some of the, how shall I put it, the things that editors have to do to keep their people on the ground safe. Now, for some media outlets, like the exile media, no matter where they are, they have to take care of the people. They still have people on the ground, but yet they're also, the headquarters must help try to verify themselves as well. So it's a combination of both. It's not always easy, but just thought I wanted to share with you how difficult it is in Myanmar. Just to be a journalist, I know and I don't quite understand how some who are still using Facebook, who I know my friends are journalists, and they're still
VPN.
criticizing, you
Yes,
know.
they're
I
using
mean,
VPN.
I mean, hats off to them, but I really fear for their concern, because
Yeah.
I know that I have friends who were in Yangon who say, you know, you could be walking down the street and you just don't know when you'll be arrested or what will happen to you. So it is a very precarious situation. But I just wanted to add to what Mon says. She knows more, but this is just reflecting from the bits and pieces that I've got from the team in Frontier. Thank you.
And just for the benefit of our audience who may have missed these two phrases, we use two phrases that are not very familiar or not very common here in the Philippines. One, of course, is XL media, because we do not have that concept here. XL media is when your journalists are unable to operate inside their own country because it's dangerous for them to do so, and they do the reporting from outside. They cover their own country from a neighboring countries, perhaps in in a neighboring Asian country. The other one is the one that was raised by Sir Mon earlier, Mon Tuason. He used the term libel tourism. It's new to me, so I had to look it up. There's an entire Supreme Court ruling on it in the U.S. So libel tourism is when they can't catch you in your own country, so they'll find where your work is also published. We use this primarily for book authors. So if your book is also in another country, then that's where they file a libel case against you, if it's more convenient to track you down there. So anyway, moving to actually one of our last two questions, perhaps. From our Malaysian colleague, Yoga, he said here, there's this word relative. For some countries, the remuneration for journalists is really bad. This is not for some, this is for all countries, I think. The remuneration is really bad. Yet they seem to be most invested in fighting for better media conditions, not just based on pay, but by removing repressive laws. Those who are more comfortable with regards to the money seem to be more laid back and not bothered. So it's a catch-22 for some media. Sorry, we'd like to ask other participants please to mute themselves. The situation has gotten worse for the media for the media in general. Your thoughts on this? I'd like to add, how can we even start demanding from our journalists to be ethical if the labor conditions are not ideal? It's so difficult. So, and anyone who'd like to take on this question? Sir Mon, are you raising your hand? Mon Tuason? Or
I was about to
oh yes, sir. Please
discuss
go ahead.
another issue, but I just want to highlight that another related issue to what was just raised is justice. You know, so there is such a thing as justice in the amount of remuneration that you receive for doing your job, but that does not make an excuse for engaging on any unethical and irresponsible journalism.
Yeah.
Because there are other options left for you.
It just makes it easier.
Yes, but it is indeed a problem of being more, there is justice in the way journalists are treated and in the way they are paid. But the reason why I raised my hand earlier, the 2 points. I hope I can. No, I was avoiding to comment on Myanmar for some reasons, but you know, at one time I had a forum with 2 senior journalists. One a very veteran journalist, and I'm sure Mon knows him, and the other one is a leader in ethnic media, and they told me that the investment that have been made in making people, including journalists, media literate, has paid off, because people and journalists in Myanmar are becoming or has become more discerning equally in terms of propaganda that they're getting from wherever. And that shows the importance of media literacy or news literacy. It's an investment against disinformation. And this is one track that I'm now working on. I'm trying to work with community-based organizations and civil society organizations, creating modules, empowering them to build disinformation resilient young people. Again, I emphasize youth and women. Educate the woman, you educate the world, as they would always say. So my track now is to empower young people and women to be disinformation resilient. Having mentioned disinformation very fast, the issue of information disorder will be used as a rationale for licensing of journalists. There is an option for me. I think the alternative is go into accreditation. And this is my personal, not UNESCO. You may go into accreditation by a professional, independent body. Could you just imagine with online media, everybody can easily be a journalist. Just upload a photo, you're a photojournalist. Upload a story, you're a news journalist, and so on and so forth. So what is the best option? Perhaps let us examine accreditation by a professional body. Here we have the Public Relations Society of the Philippines. They have a very strict standard before you are accredited and before you are called the Accredited Public Relations Practitioner or APR. That for me should be examined because it can be an option, especially licensing may no longer work. It is not doable in an online environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Mon. We'd like to call Wayu and then Tien. Wayu will have to excuse him after he gives his answer because he has another meeting. Wayu?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic, and it's always been discussed for years. The tension between giving a more better welfare for journalists and the ethical obligation for journalists. I think the two cannot be contradicted. I agree with Mr. Tuazon. It's two different issues that needs to be resolved in its own terms. We cannot use the labor issue or the lack of welfare as a way to not to adhere to journalism code of ethics and code of conduct. But I think those labor issue has also developed in times with the digital platform, because now everyone can create its own media startups, and that phenomena we are witnessing now in Indonesia, where mid and senior career journalists resign from their publishing houses and then create their own local media, digital local media in their respective communities. And I think this is a promising development because then they start with this small team, and the ownership structure is more fair in a way, because they used to work for a bigger corporation or work for a company that might not see the news as its own independent outlet, but as part of other ventures. But now with their own company, with their own digital initiative, they can make a fairer and equitable share in their ownership structure, and that they become digital entrepreneur for the media business. I think this is a new development, and we are seeing more and more of that in Indonesia. In a way, it also make the situation more complex in the media industry, but somehow we need to take that into account when we discuss the future of the labor condition in journalism.
Thank you, Wayu. I think Tien was raising his hand. You'd like to add to that?
Yes, I want to add some. As we know that for condition on journalists, it may be in some country, in it may be bad, so they uh, not many, they don't want to involve or participate in journalists. That uh, uh, that there is, it is demand for the company or the news media move from traditional media to digital platform, because when they move to digital platform, they could earn sponsor, and especially they can get subscriber from audience, that they can earn more money and they can raise the salary, this condition, a good condition to the journalists, and it also gain more good article or good content. And another thing is when they move to a digital platform, they have many platforms like Facebook, Google, or anything. They can widespread the news to the audience, and the audience know the platform well and can earn more income. Yes, that's all for me.
Thank you, Finn. Monmon, would you like to add to that, or? Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, okay. I'm okay now. They already answer.
Okay.
Completely. Yeah.
I think we've had a very comprehensive discussion, and actually there's more to be discussed. I think the May 3 World Press Freedom Day topic on journalism and surveillance is very timely. That deserves another discussion among our colleagues. And so yeah, I'd like to thank all of our speakers, Mr. Mon Tuason, our panel of reactors. Sir Pichai had to leave a bit early. Wayu, Fien, and Mon for joining us today, and all of our participants who stayed on for the last 2 hours. I think we already exceeded the time, but it was a very good discussion. If you have any parting shots or any final words to our audience before we officially close the discussion. Sir Mon, do you have any final?
It's more for my colleague Ariel and Ami, and also those who are in the press council or press institute. Time to reinvent press councils and press institutes. We have to define new responsibilities, new functions amidst a new environment, and also a new model to make them sustainable. Number 2, I'm sharing with Ariel a Google Drive which contains some very interesting reports and very interesting reports and books which he can share with all our participants today, including the book on media control by Joseph Stiglitz. No, some may not have it yet, but I'll try to share. I'll ask permission from HQ if I can already share the World Trends on Freedom of Expression 2021, 2022. I'll share the Windhoek Declaration 1991 and 2021, among others. So this could be very helpful and useful to all of you. So maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, sir. Thank you so much for the points that you raised. If no one has any other thing to add, then I would like to ask everyone to turn on your cameras. This is the part where you would have probably told me we should have done this earlier when our makeup was still intact, but turn on your cameras. We will have our photo opportunity.
No, but I'm sure the tech team has been secretly...
the tech team will do this.
In the earlier part of the program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now we'll have another one, have another photo opportunity.
Yeah.
Here, you give the
cue.
The cue.
Okay po, ready? Okay, one more.
This is so difficult. You know, you have to hold your smile. And what we should really be doing is hold the line.
Hold the line, push back.
Push back and hold the line. Are we okay now, Kier? Or
Yes, Miss Joyce.
okay. We're done with the photo op. And then we'd like to ask Kier, if this was face to face, we would have been, struggling to compress ourselves in a one firing line. We'd like to ask Kier to just flash the e-certificate, which all participants will receive. Well, we will email to you. Can you see the e-cert that is, sorry. For all of those who registered and stayed on, we will be sending you your e-certificates.
So let's take a look at the certificate.
Just
Oh,
this
there
one.
you are. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a simple certificate of participation. We'd have to make do with what we can, minus the face-to-face interaction. So it's a certificate of participation for having attended Journalism as a Public Good, Asian Perspectives on Press Freedom and Human Rights. So thank you so much, everyone. And I'd like to call Ariel Sibilino for his final words.
Thanks, Joyce. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Just an answer or reply to what Mr. Tuason, as a challenge, a huge challenge for PPI and other media organizations from the Philippines. There has been a lot of introspection during the pandemic. And as you can see, every time we discuss whether it's a training program or a roundtable, we discuss a lot of things outside of the theme. But I think if you are familiar, Filipinos are familiar with, or not familiar with the Philippine Press Council, we just started a second attempt to actually revive and attempt to establish local press councils outside Metro Manila or the capital. We will try our best for them to really appreciate it, because I think appreciation first, and then they tell themselves that they really want to do it and that they needed it, and their community will actually benefit from it. So hopefully, the first forum, we already conducted it in Luzon. We're bringing it in Mindanao and Visayas. And at the end of the first roadshow, hopefully these communities who participated in the forums, virtual forums, would tell themselves it's about time to establish local press council, keeping in mind that the only one probably that's functioning right now is the Cebu Citizens Press Council. And I'm not undermining the one up there, meaning under the Philippine Press Institute. There's much work to do in terms of recalibrating the National Philippine Press Council, but we are hopeful that the local press councils will function and even more successful than the National Press Council. So everyone will be inviting you to also join us in the other, next level of discussions at the Press Council in the other regions. So thanks everyone for joining us today. It has been an incisive, even more provocative discussion on our first international forum this year. And as Joyce said, and Attorney Gus Heinicke, hopefully we get to have another international forum or forums at the, this year, right, Joyce? Or even next year, probably. But please do join us in our other activities. So visit our pages once again for more information on our other activities. So please don't forget to like our pages and Hand Seidel Foundation as well. And hopefully we get to see you next time. Thanks very much for joining us, our panelists, and also our colleagues in the industry in the Philippines, our educators and universities. Thank you, Joyce, our seminar director and moderator. Thanks, everyone. Keep safe and see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. So now it's the time to be not so formal.
That is not